The best thing about a Dynasty startup draft is that there are lots of different ways to build, but that also means there are plenty of ways to screw it up. And making the wrong moves in your startup draft affects more than just this season. It could set your franchise back for years. We want to keep that from happening. And that's why Jared, Shane, and I are running through a Dynasty mock draft, talking about why we're making each pick and looking at what that will mean going forward. An all new Draft Sharks podcast starts right now. Matt Schauf, Jared Smola, and Shane Hallam of DraftSharks.com here to run through a Dynasty startup mock draft. Guys, we gathered before to talk about the strategy for this kind of draft. So now we're putting that into practice, kind of showing how it works. And really why we bother doing this exercise is because there are lots of different ways to actually start building your Dynasty team. That's the great thing about the format. I mean, when you're drafting for one season, there are certain things that you have to hit. You don't really want to leave your draft with weak spots at any position. When you're building for the long term, that doesn't matter as much. You can leave your draft with weak spots. You can, change gears in the middle of your draft. You can follow what the draft's doing. You can adhere to your pre-draft plan. You can usually trade. We're not going to be trading in this one, but there's lots of different things you can do with this. That also means that there are multiple ways you can screw it up, right, Jared?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think you should leave your startup draft with weak spots if you're doing it right? Because as we talked about on that best strategy show, in these startup drafts, you should be thinking about acquiring assets more than building a team, right? Because we know in Dynasty especially, you should be trading. If you're trying to maximize your roster, trading is one way to do that. The startup draft is another way to do that. So we have these different tools. So in these startup drafts, it's really more about acquiring as much value as possible, not worrying so much about fielding a team, because we're in July 1 right now. You might be doing your startup draft 6 months before the start of the season. Even if it's a month before the start of the season, you have time to actually cobble together a roster. During draft time, you should just be thinking about getting as much value as possible.
And hell, if you want to do it, you could be doing it in October. You can do a Dynasty startup anytime. Shane, do you agree that you should be leaving a draft with a weak position, or is that not necessarily the case for you?
It doesn't have to happen. The board could fall well, and you could have a good team that also is the best value. But I'm with you and Jared both. I think the value is the name of the game. You're trying to build up that team and those assets so that you can trade them later. And I think the other thing with the startup draft is getting players as much as possible that are going to appreciate in value as the season goes on. Guys that are going to increase in value. So even if you have that weak spot, maybe it's a running back, maybe it's a tight end, maybe you can't find a trade until October, November. If your other guys that you've drafted, if their value is going up, then it's going to be much easier to get an elite player at one of those positions through trade.
And not just appreciate in value during the season, of course, but appreciate over the long term as well. So that's why you'll see younger players go earlier, obviously, for the format. Makes sense. I think it can also be a reason that people overrate youth, though, and don't draft veterans, especially veterans who are still in or even at the beginning of their prime years. There can be a little bit too much focus on youth. We'll see how each of us chooses to address that age question throughout. I agree with the overarching theme that we're chasing value over building out specific positions. Certainly, if you're trying to break a tie between two close players, you can go for the one that fills a position that is weaker right now, but don't reach because you think you need a running back if the wide receiver staring at you is just that much better. So that's the setup. Now we're going to jump into it. We are doing this mock draft on Sleeper. It is super flex in format. We've got 3 wide receiver starters, PPR scoring. We're trying to draft this across formats, but those are the specific settings for this one. You will see quarterbacks go earlier. Otherwise, I think the positions will line up pretty much how you can expect them to go in Dynasty. And really, Superflex has grown to become probably the leading format in Dynasty at this point. It probably should be, because it increases the value of quarterbacks who, deserve to have that kind of value so that it matches the real game. We are drafting. We're spread out through this round. Shane's going to lead us off at 1. I'm in the middle. Jared's close to the end. I already have my Draft Sharks War Room set up, so I'll be expanding this sidebar in the draft room as I go. You can see the considerations. We'll talk through all of our decisions as we go as well. Now it's time to start this thing off, though. And Shane, what are you doing at the number 1 spot?
I think there's some options at number 1. I'm definitely going quarterback in a super flex with the current QB landscape. I think you can go with a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson and kind of play it safe. They're going to be elite for another couple years. But if I'm locked into one, I'm going to take Jayden Daniels, second-year quarterback for the Commanders. We saw what he did last year as a rookie. I think the rushing upside is going to continue to be there. We've seen the elite passing potential that he has. So for me, I think Daniels is maybe a little bit more of a risk that he could fall back this season. But I'll take the youth.
I agree with you on taking Jayden Daniels at the top of the board, and I think I even slightly disagree on him actually being risky. I think if he didn't come out last year and perform as well as he did, then maybe you could say we don't really know about him yet, but he was excellent. He was excellent as a passer. He was excellent as a runner. He was not in a loaded offense. He had Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, and not a whole lot else to work with. So there's always the possibility that things don't work out long-term, but I think there's every reason to believe in Jayden Daniels as a fantasy asset going forward, right at the same level in terms of how he scores points as Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and obviously quite a bit younger than those guys. So he'd be my top quarterback as well. The way things have fallen here, there's no way that I'm going to usually be able to get Lamar Jackson in the middle of round 1 in a super flex startup draft, but that's what we're doing in this one because he's on the board. He easily leads the recommendations in my sidebar. So I'm going to go down and find him, and as easy a pick really as I can make in the middle of this round. What do you think, Jared, about Jayden Daniels, about the quarterbacks here, about where the cutoff is that we should look at the other positions?
Yeah. You can make an argument for any of these quarterbacks at the top of the draft. I mean, I guess I'm maybe more of a coward. I probably would lean Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson at 101. Just that there's safety and sample size to me. We've just seen them do it for so long. Jayden Daniels gives you the longer term upside where, he has a longer runway as the younger player, but I still think Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are going to be doing it for another, 5+ years. So I'd lean that direction. No issue with Jayden Daniels at 1. I think to me, Jayden Daniels, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson should be the top 3 picks in Superflex. Then you start talking about some of these other quarterbacks. The other note too, if I have the 101 in the Superflex startup, I'm looking to trade down if I can 3, 4, even 5 spots into that 5 or 6 spot. Still get one of those quarterbacks. Probably pick up a lot of extra capital in the meantime. So that's something I would look into because I do think it's a pretty flat tier with those top quarterbacks.
Who are you taking at 11, given that we have 5 QBs off the board and 5 drafters who went another direction?
Yeah, I'm happy to see Patrick Mahomes still available here. I know really the past 2 years now, from a fantasy perspective, he's been underwhelming. I'm still just buying his talent. He's still young enough. He's still tied to Andy Reid. I think now Patrick Mahomes is set up with maybe the best wide receiver trio he's had in his entire career, with Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Marquise Brown. So fully betting on a bounce back, betting on the talent in the Mahomes. Happy to get him at the 111.
And then why don't you go ahead and give us your second pick, and then maybe we can circle back and talk Mahomes some more.
So once Mahomes is off the board, there is a pretty steep drop off at quarterback, and it can be risky in a super flex startup, especially if you're at the end, like passing on a quarterback here and having to wait, all the way around, however many picks that is, 22 picks or whatever, and hope there's another viable quarterback available. I think there will be. I'm going to take that gamble, and I'm going to go with Puka Nacua here, who has just really through 2 NFL seasons just shown unbelievable target earning ability, even alongside Cooper Kupp, strong efficiency, still a young player. Puka Nacua to me is a safe dynasty asset.
I agree with that. And I agree with Patrick Mahomes being the pick there. I think there's a pretty clear top 6 at quarterback for Dynasty. And I think that Patrick Mahomes really is not all that much different than Joe Burrow right now. It doesn't look like it by the fantasy numbers over the past couple of years, but the key difference between Mahomes and Burrow is that Burrow has had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and Patrick Mahomes has had trouble with wide receivers since Tyreek Hill left. I mean, Kansas City tried last year. Rashee Rice has certainly been a revelation versus where they drafted him. They imported Marquise Brown last year. They also drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round. So I agree with what you said. I think this year could be the best set of receivers that Mahomes has had, maybe ever. I mean, I don't think any of those players is going to be Tyreek Hill, but collectively, I think this could very well be the best group of receivers that he will have had in his career. I think by the end of the season, we could all be looking at Mahomes as more like an equal asset to Joe Burrow than we are right now. And to me, it's that top 6 at quarterback. I would probably take all 6 of those guys before targeting another position in the first round of my superflex startup. What about you, Shane?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think that the top 6 is a tier all of its own. It's a pretty big drop off, and I think Mahomes fits. I mean, he's still to me the best pure quarterback in the NFL, even if the fantasy numbers haven't backed that up. So I'm with you guys there. If one of those 6 is available to me in the first round, I'm taking them. And like Jared mentioned, picking at the 101, I would have loved to trade down and just get any of those 6 at any other point.
Yeah, I would be fine with doing that as well. I'd be reluctant to trade outside of the top 6 in case all of those quarterbacks went in a row, but I would certainly be willing to make that move. In this particular draft, we saw non-quarterbacks go at both picks at that turn after Jared, Malik Neighbors, Bijan Robinson. I can't fault either of those players being drafted. We'll see if that team suffers at quarterback for not taking a QB at either of those spots. Love Puka. We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., Ashton Genty, then Caleb Williams as the 7th quarterback off the board to the team that drafted Jalen Hurts in round 1. Of course, these are computer drafters, so they're going to be going a bit more by ADP than team strategy, most likely, but we'll see how that works for what's available to us. So now I'm up in the middle of round 2. I'm going to resume the draft. I'm going to check my Draft Shark sidebar and see what the recommendation is. It's got wide receivers up top, and it's got Nico Collins well ahead of Drake London. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to take Nico Collins to kick off my wide receiver core. Injuries are the big question with him, but if he's able to stay healthy, I mean, he's also showed us top end production. I have no long-term concerns about CJ Stroud, even though his second year was a lot less encouraging than his rookie year. So I had no issues with Nico Collins in the middle of round 2.
Yeah, just elite yards per route numbers from Nico. Like I think he's a superstar player. He was good last year, even as that Texans passing game crumbled around him. So he seems super safe, and I think he has top 3 wide receiver upside. Both this year and beyond.
And by the way, really good at coming back from that leg injury as well. So a nice young player. Shane, what are you doing at the 2-3 turn here?
I think I'm going to go with a running back. I like the running back value here, and it could take Marion Hampton or Breece Hall, but Devon A-Chain is probably my favorite of the group just for the pass catching upside. Now with Jonnu Smith off the Dolphins, I think even this year is going to be pretty good for A-Chain, and he's young enough. If that offense stays consistent, that I think we see these numbers continue. So I love him as an RB1 in Dynasty. And then I'm going to go back to the wide receiver. Well, I think, you know what? I'm not. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go running back again because Christian McCaffrey's still there, and I'm going to take McCaffrey here at the 301, maybe a little bit early, but I kind of like him over some of the receivers there and get some immediate production from McCaffrey. I know you could see him fall sometimes the 4th round of these dynasty startups. I probably would try to trade down from this spot if I wanted to go with someone who's a little bit older, going to get me more production this year. But I like the way my team's shaping up, that I could get maybe an older guy and then I can trend younger a little bit later.
Shane, did you just take us back to like 1991 by taking 2 running backs among your first 3 picks in a startup draft?
I know. Look at this. So this is not usually how I like to go, but I think with Nico in London off the board, I like the running back value more than I thought I would here. So yeah, we're going old school Dynasty.
I mean, is that even allowed right now? I feel like you'd probably get arrested if we were on Reddit right now.
Yeah, probably. I'd be in Reddit jail easily.
We did have several other quarterbacks go. After my pick, we had Bo Nix, then Drake London, Saquon Barkley, Justin Herbert went to team 2, then Shane's 2 running backs, Trey McBride, Ladd McConkey, CJ Stroud off the board, Garrett Wilson. Now I'm back up in the middle of round 3. We've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 quarterbacks gone. Let's see what the draft war room says I should do with my next pick. Breece Hall, not surprisingly, leads the way as he was up there for Shane's pick. I'm a little hesitant to go running back over wide receiver here, but because there's that gap in 3D value between Breece Hall and AJ Brown, and there are other wide receivers, I'm going to go ahead and take the shot on the running back and see what wide receiver looks like beyond this. It is a mock draft after all, right, guys? So if I don't like how it ends up, then I know for the real thing that maybe I switch it up going forward.
I wanted to go back to Shane's team quick because I think I brought up this idea in the best strategy show we did, and I feel like you guys even might have disagreed with it a little bit. But my point was in these startup mocks, I like picking a lane early and sticking to that. So to me now, Shane has kind of picked more of a win now lane with that McCaffrey pick. And that's not saying he can't still be building for the future and trying to accumulate value and get these guys that are going to appreciate in value. But to me, like, Shane should now be leaning towards building a team that's going to win this year, right? Because that's the type of pick McCaffrey is. So we'll see if Shane does that or if he just totally disregards my thought there.
So what do you think about that before we get to more picks, Shane? Do you feel like you need to try to build to win now, or is this just, a pick in a team that you're still building?
And I think it's kind of one of the reasons I want to make the pick too, even if the value wasn't the best, was to kind of see how that goes. And I think that's a really good reason to do mock drafts on Draft Sharks before you do your startup, just to try these different things. I'm probably not going to lean full win now, but it's going to break some ties if I want to go with a rookie who might not get me anything this year. I might go with someone who's a little bit older to get me some production this year because I can compete and potentially win a title with this squad.
To me, just the idea of shifting mentally to I'm going to build this team to win now is a mistake, because I think it's going to make you make selections differently than you should for building the team that, should compete beyond this year. I see how Christian McCaffrey, especially as an early pick, is a win now pick, but he's also just one player on a roster that's going to wind up being, probably 30 plus players. So I don't know. To me, Jared, shifting that thinking would be a mistake, because I think it has the potential to, steer you in the wrong direction in future decisions in this draft.
I think it's the extent to which you make that shift. Right? I'm not saying Shane treats this as a redraft league now and starts taking all these, old running backs and 32-year-old wide receivers. I'm not saying that, but my point is, if Shane doesn't win this league in the next 2, maybe 3 years, what is that McCaffrey pick doing for him?
I mean, he's certainly trying to win it this year, but I don't know. I don't think that it's a mistaken pick if he doesn't win within the next 2 seasons.
And I'll also say a player like McCaffrey can give me some flexibility. Let's say my team underperforms, but McCaffrey is performing. Now, I'm not a playoff team, but I have a really good asset to trade to a playoff team. They may not be interested in, the rookie I draft in round 7, though.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the trade window on McCaffrey is small, right? Because if you hold him until next offseason, even if he has a huge year, we know how dynasty players are. Like, they're going to see this running back who will be 29 at that point. And I don't care how big of a season he had in 2025. You're not going to get more value from McCaffrey next offseason than you would right now. So I guess my point would be, if you are going to trade him, that window would definitely have to be in the middle of this coming season.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a good spot in the Venn diagram between your two approaches on this. Is if Shane gets to, November and his team is not going to win the league this season, then he's probably selling Christian McCaffrey pretty hard. That's what I'm getting from you, right, Shane?
Yeah, I think that's the flexibility that you have to have. And, it's why you can't get married to these players that you pick in the startup. You have to be willing to trade them away.
Yeah, no monogamy in startup drafts. All right, Jared, let's get things going again. What are you doing at the end of round 3?
Yeah, so Drake May would have been tempting for me as my quarterback too. Just obviously the youth, the passing talent, and the rushing upside he showed us last year. Really exciting for me. I think he could be a guy we're talking about as a top 6 fantasy quarterback for the next decade. So he would have been enticing. Once May's off the board, nothing gets me going at quarterback. I think it's a really flat tier now. The question for me is going to be, do I push it off again in the 4th round and wait and see what is available to me in the 5th? But for now, I'm definitely looking position player, and I'm going to go with AJ Brown here. He's still only 28. I know he's on the older side, but we know these receivers can produce into their 30s. AJ Brown last year was still a fantasy wide receiver 1, despite a super run heavy season from the Eagles. So I just think Brown gives me a nice combination of current production, and I think, again, he still has some longer term value.
And then maybe team 12 in this draft doesn't know that it's super flex, because we've got 4 picks in, no quarterbacks there, 2 rookie wide receivers around the turn. I mean, we can joke about a computer picking like this. There are definitely dynasty players who would pick this team to start things out, feel like they're just going contrarian, and like the rest of the league is going to be chasing them later on. Malik Neighbors, Bijan Robinson, Travis Hunter, Ted McMillan. It's back to you at 402, Jared. What are you doing with this spot?
Yeah, and this makes it easier for me to push quarterback further, because the 2 guys I was deciding between at 311 were AJ Brown and Jonathan Taylor. And Jonathan Taylor makes it back to me here. He's 26 years old, so that's I believe that's peak age for running back according to our aging curve. So not that he's still on the ascent, not that he has a long runway left, but like Jonathan Taylor, I think he's become underrated in fantasy for whatever reason. Like, this guy averaged over 100 rushing yards per game last year in what was a bad offense for most of the season. I would want to see not Anthony Richardson under center for Jonathan Taylor. going forward. I think it'd be better for his fantasy value, both target volume and rushing touchdown potential without Richardson siphoning those. But that's more of a short-term question for me. I don't think Richardson's the long-term answer in Indianapolis. So I'm going to take Jonathan Taylor here, and I'd like him in the 4th round as my RB1.
Yeah, and it sure seems like we're trending toward not Anthony Richardson this year, and then somebody that's not him or Daniel Jones probably next year. I agree on AJ Brown. I think that he's the one concern I have with him is his knees, where he could wear down quicker than other wide receivers his age. But that said, he's wide receiver 14 in this draft, certainly late enough to take on that risk. So I'm back up in the middle of round 4. Jordan Love went as the 12th quarterback off the board. I've got wide receivers now topping the board. Rashee Rice by a pretty big margin. I like it. So I'm just going to go ahead and take Rashee Rice here. It's a pretty easy pick. He was performing like a wide receiver 1 level fantasy producer before getting injured last year. He's still with Mahomes. We haven't yet seen just what the target share is going to look like with Xavier Worthy on the field, with Rashee Rice, with a healthy Hollywood Brown, with whatever version of Travis Kelce we get this year. But the way that Rashee Rice got targets and produced late in his rookie year, and for the sliver of his second season that we got to see, at least gives me upside, the chance that he is a top 12 wide receiver going forward.
Yeah, I think getting Rashee Rice in the middle of round 4 is an absolute steal. To me, you could argue him over all those wide receivers that went in round 3.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, I love the value on receivers. T. Higgins, Rashee Rice in that middle of round 4 is such a sweet spot. So I love that. I'm up at the 412.
Come on, 2 more running backs, Shane, or double up tight end.
Look, maybe I can take 2 more running backs. We have 4 of them. That's good. Who needs a super flex? We can have a running back in the super flex. No, I'm going to go receiver. I like 3 guys here: Xavier Worthy, Devonta Smith, and DJ Moore. I think are head and shoulders above the rest of the receiver and running back group. So I'm going to go with Worthy as kind of the younger option with some upside. They can give me some value this year. I think we'll have some spike weeks, even if it's not necessarily his peak. And then I'm going to take DJ Moore as my other one. I think people are sleeping on him. Matt and I definitely in line in the DJ Moore fan club. And I think he's going to be kind of a rock solid wide receiver 1 for me this year.
I want to pause for a second because I think Xavier Worthy versus Devonta Smith is interesting. I think that the downside case for Devonta Smith in Dynasty right now from some people, and nobody actually dislikes Devonta Smith, but the limiting factor, I guess, for him as a Dynasty asset is there are plenty of guys who kind of top out as a number 2 level fantasy receiver. And how much value is there to that guy? Can you maybe sell that guy for more value to somebody else who doesn't see the same ceiling? That's what I wonder if there is for Xavier Worthy. So I guess it doesn't really matter for Devonta Smith at the moment because he hasn't come off the board yet. He's still going to be there for me. But for Xavier Worthy, my question on him, both in the short term and the longer term, is I wonder how high that ceiling goes. I know that we all like, Patrick Mahomes wide receiver. We also haven't seen multiple receivers work out in Kansas City. I wonder if he's limited by Rashee Rice. I wonder if he's limited by just the type of player that he is. He's small, he's fast, so he's going to be useful, but I wonder if there's just limited volume to him. And, I think the value is okay here. He's just not a guy that I'm targeting in any format because I think the market likes Xavier Worthy better than I do for fantasy.
I'll say the one difference for me is that the Chiefs could go back to being a pass volume offense. And I think the Eagles, we know what they are, that's just not going to happen for Devonta Smith. We'll always get those kind of blow up weeks when AJ Brown gets that coverage. I think Xavier Worthy could end up in a similar situation where Rashee Rice, week to week gets a little bit more coverage. Worthy blows up and the next week he doesn't do much. I think if we get more pass volume for the Chiefs going forward, then Patrick Mahomes certainly can support 2 receivers, especially if that tight end position after Travis Kelce retires it turns into a pumpkin and isn't used as much.
Jared, I say something about Xavier Worthy every time I get the chance, so I feel like it's only fair that I give you a shot to also say whatever you want about Xavier Worthy.
So I think you're right in comparing Smith and Worthy. I actually think Devonta Smith is probably more capable of being like an NFL number 1 wide receiver than Xavier Worthy. But I think Shane nailed it, that the difference here and why I would lean Worthy is just he's tied to Patrick Mahomes in an offense that historically under Andy Reid has been one of the past heaviest offenses in the NFL, where we know Philly, as long as Jalen Hurts is going to be there, it's going to be one of the run heaviest offenses in the NFL. So for that reason, I would lean towards Worthy between those two, but I definitely think they're close. I think they're in the same tier.
Yeah. And, I talk about the things that we don't know about this offense, but one of the things that we don't know is as Travis Kelce, does finally age out of the NFL, which is going to happen at some point. Don't know exactly when yet, but probably after this season. So we don't know what the target distribution looks like without Travis Kelce there with Patrick Mahomes. So there should be a lot more available for wide receivers. We should get a second Chiefs wide receiver doing better. There is more upside to Xavier Worthy probably than what I'm giving him credit for. So moving beyond the latest Worthy discussion, I'm up now. We've got running back at the top of the board. I like Kenneth Walker, but that's a short-term play. I think as soon as next year, he could look a lot worse as a dynasty asset. So I'm going to jump over him. I'm going to go to Zay Flowers, who I think I probably like better than anybody else on the staff does. To me, the difference between Zay Flowers and Devonta Smith is, well, first off, Zay Flowers is the number one receiver for his teams. Maybe that doesn't mean more volume for him than it does for Devonta Smith as the number two for Philly, because it's a very concentrated passing game. But I also still don't know what the ceiling is yet for Zay Flowers. He's been maybe unlucky on touchdowns over his early part of his career. Maybe that's just what he's going to be going forward because he's a little guy. But if he stays in kind of the role in terms of opportunities that he gets for Baltimore, I think touchdowns are going to follow. I think he's going to look like a better dynasty asset going forward. And I think right now his perceived value is a little bit lower than it should be. So I really like picking up Zay Flowers as my third wide receiver. I'd be fine with Devonta Smith in that spot instead, but I'm curious to see what happens with Zay Flowers here. And honestly, I didn't even think about it before going into all that, but I already have Lamar Jackson. So that's a pretty easy tiebreaker between Zay Flowers and another close wide receiver.
Yeah, I wonder about Flowers' ultimate ceiling. For one, in that offense, and two, just the type of player he is. I don't think he's ever going to be a big touchdown scorer. He could have, seasons where he spikes in touchdowns, but I think long term he's not going to be a big touchdown scorer. But I think as your wide receiver 3 in the dynasty, like when you think about his age and his draft pedigree, like he's just a super safe pick.
Agreed. So what do we got for you at the end of round 5?
Yeah, so this is interesting for me. So, I mean, for starters, I'm not going to take a running back here. Ken Walker is still available. I think he's a fine pick. But after taking Jonathan Taylor, I don't want to take another RB here. I'm not as boomer as Shane is, taking 2 running backs that early. Quarterback is starting to be in consideration for me. I think it has to be in one of these next 2 picks, but there's nothing on the board I see is like I have to have right now. At tight end, both the rookies are still available. Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren. They're super interesting to me, but I don't think I can take either of them over Devonta Smith, which is interesting because I do already have AJ Brown. So I think that might push people away from Devonta Smith. But going back to what we talked about at the start of this mock draft, I think value accumulation is just more important than, what my actual team looks like. And to me, Devonta Smith just shouldn't still be available in the, back end of round 5, just his age, his draft pedigree, his prior production. I just think he's a really strong value here. So I'm going to take Devonta Smith, whether I hold him on this team along with AJ Brown, that'd be something to consider later, but it's a mock draft. I don't have to consider. I'm just going to take the value in Devonta Smith.
Shane, what would you do while Jared's thinking through his next pick? What would you do with Devonta Smith here if you already have AJ Brown on your roster?
I'm with Jared. I'd take him. I think it's best to just have that good value. And we certainly have had weeks where both of those receivers have done well, or you feel like, especially in Philly, one's going to have a really good game at the very least. So I don't mind starting it that way. And at some point you can always trade one. And, a couple years down the line, they might not both be on the Philadelphia Eagles. You never know.
Jared, I'll let you make your next pick, and then I got some thoughts on Devonta Smith here.
Yeah, so, for starters, Trevor Lawrence and Cam Ward were the top 2 quarterbacks on the board. So interesting that they go off there. Team 12 might be using the draft forum as well there. Both rookie tight ends are still available as well. So, I think the question here for me is, do I really gamble and push quarterback off again, only having won through the first 6 rounds and kind of praying a couple starters make it back to me at 7 and 8, or do I, take a Dak Prescott as a top quarterback on our board? It's a mock draft. I'm going to gamble, man. I'm going to take Colson Loveland here. I think a lot of times in these startup drafts, I will just totally punt tight end and, not take one until, the double-digit rounds and try to cobble something together. But I do think Loveland is a guy who, could truly be a difference-making tight end for a long time. And to me, that's worth it at this price.
For me, it would be a quarterback over a tight end, especially that early in the tight ends. But I can understand the case for Loveland. And like you said, it's a mock. So sometimes it's worth just doing the thing that you wouldn't normally do and seeing if it works out. And to that end, like we like to laugh at some of the things that computer drafters do, but I feel like the way that Team 12 approach this is working out. I mean, no quarterbacks through the first 4 picks, gets to that 5-6 turn and gets Trevor Lawrence and Cam Ward as I believe the QB 17, 18, something like that off the board, maybe 18, 19. That'd be a nice way to start off a dynasty team. What do you think, Jared?
Yeah, love it. He even got the Trevor Lawrence, Travis Hunter stack, so he's super sharp. Yeah, I think again, this is what we say. There are multiple different ways to do this, especially in superflex. Like there are different ways to build these teams. This team gambled for sure, especially being on the turn, waiting that long for a quarterback. It definitely could have backfired, but I think it worked out in this case.
I think if you look 3 teams over, you can watch it backfiring on team 9 because it's got 4 running backs and 2 wide receivers through 6 rounds. No quarterbacks yet. It's still like, oh, I don't even know what quarterbacks are. Maybe I'll snap the ball to Brian Thomas. So it's definitely not working there. I certainly wouldn't get through 6 rounds of a super flex startup without a quarterback. And that, though, is another one of those strategies where sometimes you see it and you know that league mate is like, I'm just going to load up on first round rookie picks next year. And I'm going to get my young quarterbacks and I'm going to wait later in this draft. And I'm going to get Daniel Jones and these old quarterbacks and I'll punt this season. I hate the idea of punting the first season of a dynasty league. I'm not saying it can't work. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. You certainly can if you want, as long as you know what you have to do to make it work. I will absolutely never be the one punting, though. I'm drafting to compete this year and to compete year after year. Going back to the Devonta Smith pick, I agree with both of you guys overall in not shoving off value just because you have that teammate. I think in this particular case, I don't see Devonta Smith being way ahead of like Chris Olave and DK Metcalf and Jordan Addison in value. So in this case, I would lean away from stacking those 2 teammates because we're not going to get that many weeks of both of them working out together. And so I think it's going to end up weakening my lineup. And I also get the idea that I can just trade one of these guys away. That's certainly the case. And that very well might work out even before the first season starts. So I'm not saying that that's a bad strategy. For me, when I have leaned that way, like I have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin together on a team, I haven't had as much luck moving one of those guys away, and I then do have to start them together more often. That's been okay, but I do think it's a limiting factor when you're starting 2 wide receivers from this same team, especially if it's not, top of the league in passing volume.
Yeah, it can definitely be dangerous to draft someone with the idea that you're eventually going to trade him because you just don't know how the rest of the league is going to value that player. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I wouldn't even say I'm doing this here, even though it's a mock draft and I don't actually need to worry about it. I think the difference between us here, Matt, is I do view Devonta Smith as a tier above those other guys you listed. Just looking at safety combined with ceiling, I think he beats those other guys.
Maybe you should have taken Colston Loveland there. It's just to make sure he didn't get taken from you around the turn. All right, so I'm back up in the middle of round 6. I'm going to check and see what the draft war room has for me here. Dak Prescott at the top, Jared Goff, Michael Penix, Bryce Young. So the draft war room's like, dude, take a quarterback. It's time. I agree. I've got 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, Lamar Jackson. I think it's time to take a quarterback. Do you go youth? Do you go proven production? I'm going to go ahead and chase proven production here, especially because it's quarterback, and I don't expect Dak Prescott to be done after this season. So I think I'm getting at least 2 years from Dak. I expect that we're going to get good production from him this year, probably good production from him the following year. We'll see if that includes George Pickens. I don't know what to make of him, but I like him for the coming season. I like the value on Dak Prescott in low QB2 territory for this draft.
I like the pick. I was hoping Dak would fall to me. I think would have fit in well with my McCaffrey-esque team. So you gave me the snipe there.
That's what I'm here for, Shane. What are you doing now at the 6-7 turn with a broken heart?
Yeah, I mean, I should take a quarterback. I think this is a good spot to take one, but man, I like the wide receiver value still. And I feel like the quarterbacks left, Jared Goff would be fine for a little while. And then the other guys are kind of younger that you mentioned, Matt and Penix and Young. So I'm going to actually double tap receiver again and just kind of finish that off. I'm going to go with Chris Olave, who I think's heavily undervalued because of the concussion last year and the situation in New Orleans. I like Tyler Shuck more than I think most Dynasty players, and think that offense will be better than it seems. And then I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle. I think Jalen Waddle, especially now after the Jonnu Smith trade, also just undervalued because of the poor Miami defense last year. I think they bounce back, and I think Waddle is going to put up better than wide receiver 4 numbers, so that's what he'll be on my team.
I'll say I believe in Jalen Waddle both this year and beyond more than I do Chris Olave right now. I'm very curious to see where Chris Olave goes from here, because he's either underrated, dramatically underrated, or just kind of appropriately rated. And we haven't really gotten a great chance to see what to expect from him year after year. What do you think about those guys, Jared?
I love both those picks. I'm curious to see how this works out for Shane from a quarterback perspective. I thought I was, being ballsy, putting it off at that last turn, but for Shane to do it here, be waiting all the way. So will that be the end of round 8 for his quarterback too? We'll see how that works out. I love Olave and Waddle. I think both guys are super talented receivers, still right in their primes. I know they both have question marks, but I think at these prices, they could both end up being steals looking back on this draft next year.
Yeah, I'm certainly on board with Olave at this point in the draft. Shane, if it were a real draft and this is a team you were going to have to carry into the future, would you have been able to double tap receiver there, or do you think you would have taken a quarterback?
No, I think I would have still double tapped receiver there. I definitely in superflex I seem to always get the quarterbacks both super early or that second one. I'll just wait. So we'll see how it comes back up. I have a feeling I might double tap quarterback in the next turn.
We'll see if that works out for you. Of course, it's easy for you to say what you would do on a real game. You can't really know for sure. I did get my quarterback. I got Shane's quarterback last time. So now wide receiver tops my board. I don't see a ton of difference among these guys. Jordan Addison, DK Metcalf, Tyreek Hill. I'm going to go ahead and take DK Metcalf just because he's the number 1 wide receiver for his team, at least this season. And then, we'll see what's happening in Pittsburgh beyond that. I like Jordan Addison. He's young. He's been very productive. He's also going to have to contend with Justin Jefferson. So it might not be a hugely limiting factor. It's going to be a limiting factor. If you like Addison instead, fine. Certainly no issue with that, but I'm going to take Metcalf as my next receiver here. Jared, what are you doing late in round 7?
Yeah, so pushing off quarterback and taking level definitely worked out for me. There were only 2 quarterbacks that went between my last 2 picks here. The question now for me here would be, do I want to double tap quarterback, or do I want to take another position player and then take my last quarterback? I am going to, let's see what's available elsewhere. Yeah, there's nothing enticing enough for me at running back or wide receiver. So I'm going to hopefully double tap quarterback here, and I will start by taking Michael Penix as my quarterback too. Obviously didn't see a ton of him last year, but I think what we did see was pretty enticing, right? He's not going to give us rushing upside. That's the issue with Penix, but I think he has all the arm you could ask for. Nice weaponry, really strong offensive line in Atlanta, good coaching staff. I think all the pieces are in place for Penix to be a successful pro. Then, yeah, I am going to double tap quarterback here, and I'm going to take another young quarterback in Bryce Young, who looks like a total bust through his first year and 3 games or whatever it was, but was really good over the second half of last season. Not so much in fantasy. I think he was quarterback 17 over the second half of the season, but they've obviously added weaponry in Tet McMillan. I still believe in Dave Canales. Bryce Young gives you some rushing upside. So I think Penix and Young, I don't think either is going to ever be a difference maker, but I think they both could be like fringy quarterback 1 types. And I'll definitely take that at this point of a super flex.
What made you lean Michael Penix over Bryce Young as the first pick?
ADP in the sleeper room. Honestly, Penix was listed higher. I think we have Young 1 spot ahead in our rankings. I figured Young was slightly better chance to make it back to me.
Yeah, that was what made me curious, especially because, of course, these rankings are built on the projections which you pilot. So I was like, it seems like Jared likes Bryce Young better than Michael Penix, but he's taking Michael Penix.
Yep. There's a little, draft strategy for you. Always pay attention to ADP and just how guys are listed in your draft room.
And I just want to look back at a couple of other picks in this range. So George Pickens went a few spots after I took DK Metcalf. Mark Andrews just went ahead of my round 8 pick. I have Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson on my team. So some people might look at this board and be like, well, why didn't you take George Pickens? Because you have his quarterback. Why didn't you take Mark Andrews to not give anybody else a chance to take him? I'm not using stacking as a primary strategy here. I know I talked about getting Zay Flowers on my Lamar Jackson team, but I didn't reach for Zay Flowers because I have Lamar Jackson. That was just like oh, cool, I have his quarterback for this receiver that made sense for me anyway. Like I said at the time, it was even an afterthought for Zay Flowers joining the team. Do not reach to make stacks on your dynasty team. For one thing, you're probably just playing in a single league, so the benefit to stacking is limited. You're just trying to beat, 9, 11, however many other teams. You're not trying to win a tournament. So you don't need that ultimate upside of the wide receiver quarterback combo. And when those two underperform, or when one of the two gets hurt, you're taking on more of the downside risk for those guys, especially specific to Pickens. We don't even know if he's going to be in Dallas beyond this season. So that's not even a consideration for me if I did want to stack the wide receiver with the quarterback. So just a general note for me, though, I would not think much about stacking on a dynasty team. What do you think about that, Shane? Is stacking at all a consideration for you?
No, unless you're playing a high volume of best ball leagues, to me, stacking is not something you need to do in dynasty, in redraft, home leagues. I don't really worry about it. Like you said, it can break a tie if you really wanted to, but don't reach for a guy just to stack it. It's not going to help you, especially in dynasty when things change so quickly.
So the draft war room wants me to take a quarterback here. They pretty easily lead the board. Tua's the top guy, but because I already have the proven veteran producer, Dak Prescott's going to be my second starting quarterback for this season, I'm going to take a shot on the younger guy. I'm going to go Jackson Dart. I believe that whenever he starts for the Giants, it's going to happen sometime within the next couple of years. And he has nice fantasy upside between his rushing ability and his deep passing ability, and having Malik Neighbors on his team is certainly not going to hurt too much. If I had taken a younger quarterback instead of Dak Prescott in that spot, like if Cam Ward had made it to that position and I took him instead of Dak, then maybe I would lean toward the veteran just in case Cam Ward does not deliver, especially early on. I think those two would probably work together better, but as it is, I'm happy to take a quarterback. I'm happy to take an upside rookie.
Yeah, perfect example of like building a team that makes sense, right? Like I think because you kind of have those two locked in guys in Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott, I definitely think Jackson Dart made more sense than Tua for this team.
And now we get to watch Shane not take quarterback again, right, Shane?
No, I think it's time. I liked 3 quarterbacks left. Matt, you took Jackson Dart. So I'm going to take Justin Fields here to give me kind of that rushing upside. I think can be an upside QB2. But because Fields, if he has another bad year, might not be a starter in a year or two, then I'm going to take a kind of a safety quarterback with Tua here at the 901. Again, ends up stacking with some of my players, not really a consideration, but Tua's, I think, a solid QB3 that can fill in bye weeks and is probably still going to be sticking around in Miami for a couple years.
And when Tua has a good week, it's probably going to be at least a decent week for Jalen Waddle and maybe a boom week for him, especially if Tyreek Hill takes, another step or two back this year. Justin Fields is a very interesting dynasty asset because he's at the very least, I think, going to be a good play this year. And then we'll see beyond that. He has a 2-year contract. So maybe you're getting a 2-year starter at quarterback, but maybe, like you said, Shane, we're getting 1 year of Justin Fields and then somebody who's backing up for teams beyond that. I think if you can make him part of a 3 quarterback build, he's going to be a nice guy to have around. And I would be hesitant to do so with weak insurance behind him.
Yeah, I don't think I would have taken Fields and went elsewhere and just, punted the third quarterback. I think you need that kind of at least a stable third quarterback behind him.
Jared, did you think about Justin Fields at all back at your term when you took Penix and Young?
I did, for sure. I think he undoubtedly beats those guys in upside, right? But I think long-term stability, Young and Penix pretty easily beat Fields. So I leaned in that direction. But, if you are looking at a bit more of a win now attitude, I think, Fields is the guy for this season. I think that waiting on quarterback worked out for Shane. Fields plus Tua, like not the ideal combo to me, just because I do think they're both riskier long-term. Tua just because the injury stuff with the concussions. But, when you're waiting as long as Shane did, you can't be that picky. He at least got, 2 locked-in starters for this season.
Now, the draft war room wants me to take running back here. The top 3 are pretty well ahead of Chris Godwin, who's the 4th player in my sidebar. But DeAndre Swift does nothing for me. Travis Etienne doesn't do much more. And even Tony Pollard, who I like better than those 2 guys for this coming season, I think probably has limited shelf life going forward. I'm going to go ahead and take Chris Godwin. He's my 5th wide receiver. I only have 1 running back. So I get why the draft war room wants me to take a running back, but I also don't think I'm getting an advantage by taking one of those 3 running backs here, as opposed to waiting and seeing what running back makes it back to me in round 10. So for me, it's Chris Godwin, and we'll see exactly how soon he's ready to be Chris Godwin this year. But the Bucks believe in him still, coming off of last year's injury, and he believes in the Bucks. He reportedly stuck with them as opposed to taking more money from the Patriots.
He was like a top 5 fantasy receiver last year before going down. So like, I get there's concerns with the injury and the age, but I think he could again be a wide receiver 1 this year.
Yeah, but Magic Man Liam Cohen's gone now, so the Bucs offense is going to crumble.
Yeah,
Jared, what you got here?
I'm feeling like I need to continue building out the wide receiver room at this point. I like going wide receiver heavier in startup drafts. We know receivers just maintain their value longer than running backs do. So I'm fine punting off running back into the double-digit rounds after kind of getting that locked in RB1 in Jonathan Taylor. I'm gonna go Jayden Reed here. Matt's talked enough about the Packers passing game this offseason. He's started to convince me that it's a good buying opportunity on Green Bay. Just I don't think they want to go as run heavy as they did last year. A lot of things happened to kind of make that be the case. There are concerns for Reed. He's not a full-time player in that offense. He's a slot only guy. He only plays in 3 wide receiver sets. That dings the upside, but he's just been super efficient through his few NFL seasons now. And again, I do think he's tied to a stable quarterback long-term and a passing game that will have better volume this year.
Yeah, I think there's still the possibility that we get role growth for him at some point, but we certainly shouldn't expect it now. We should expect that he's going to play the same kind of role that he did the past 2 years. So he's solid at this point. And, like you said, I like the upside on the Packers passing game this year. What do you got in round 10?
All right, yeah, so I'm going to swing for the fences a bit here with another wide receiver. I'm going to go Keon Coleman, who's someone I just like as a target in redraft this year. And obviously, if I like him in redraft, I should like him in Dynasty because he's a young player just entering his second season. The Bills, he was basically a first-round pick last year. I think, did the Bills take him with the very first pick of round 2, or maybe it was the second pick of round 2? So he got draft capital. He has size. There were some things to like about his rookie season. He was used a lot in the red zone. He was used downfield. He was good after the catch. And really, you look at how his season went, he might have been starting to break out last year. His 2 games before the wrist injury were both really strong outings. Then he got hurt, missed a few weeks, was never the same after coming back. So I think the wrist injury might have kind of prevented even what would have been a rookie year breakout. I still think Coleman has exciting upside, tied to Josh Allen.
We had a mini run on tight ends between your turn and my pick in this round. Kyle Pitts, Tucker Kraft, Jonnu Smith going off the board. Team 9 still has no quarterbacks, which that's definitely not happening in reality. Yeah. Somebody I think hacked this bot and is protesting against quarterbacks in general, probably a contract driven thing. But overall, tight ends we're seeing come off the board slower than the other positions. Outside of Jared's extreme love for Colston Loveland. That's how I would treat tight ends in general in these drafts. Jared, you did already take Loveland. I know that you're not actually like a tight end lover, that you would be totally fine waiting on the position. So is that the case? Was it just like Loveland fits here, or is it like I feel like I need to get a good young tight end?
No, that was an uncomfortable pick for me taking Loveland. But again, I thought he was better than the position players available at that point. But like I said, in general punt off tight end pretty late. I'd much rather prioritize the other 3 positions.
Mm-hmm. And Shane, to me, the tight end is the easiest position to say, I'll figure it out later, because even if I make it out of the draft with like 2 schlubs, it's okay. That's the easiest position, I think, even when you get into the season, to be like, I'll just put this guy in the lineup and hope I get a touchdown.
I mean, you can look historically at guys like Jake Ferguson emerging out of nowhere, right? Kate Otten last year was startable. Like, you can use the waiver wire or trade for a low end tight end who might give you a weekly upside. I think in Dynasty, it's much easier. And we're also in a year that was a strong kind of rookie tight end class with some young upside. If you wait even another couple rounds, you could draft a younger guy, a rookie that has that starter upside in a year or 2 as well.
I still need a second starting running back for this year, and that wouldn't be a reason for me to reach over other players, but Jaylen Warren's at the top of my draft war room. He's well ahead of Bashal Tutin in 3D value there. I like him for this year. I don't need to figure out beyond this year because it's round 10 and I'm just looking for an RB2 right now. So I'm going to go ahead and take Jaylen Warren. I might end up regretting taking him over Tutin if Tutin emerges quickly. And, if you're like, why would you take that guy who's going to be good for 1 year and then nothing? If that, maybe he's even limited this year and works behind Caleb Johnson. Maybe that's the case. This could end up being a mistake later on, but it's also possible that Tutin doesn't do anything this year and is just part of a committee going forward. So either way, I'm going to take Jaylen Warren in this particular spot.
Well, I'll follow it up at the 10-12. I'll take Bashal Tutin here at the end of the 10th round. Thank you for passing. But I like that with my build of having A-Chain and McCaffrey. I mean, they're going to start for me at running back every week. I'm going to start a receiver in the flex. I can take a shot on Tutin, who maybe emerges like a Bucky Irving or Tyrone Tracy, and then hey, now my running backs in the future, even when McCaffrey's done, look good. Or if he does nothing as a rookie, but has some potential year 2 or 3, I don't need Tootin this year. So I think it really works for the team that I have right here.
What are you getting on the other pick at that turn to round things out here?
So I definitely still need a tight end as well. But like you said, I think I can kick it off for longer. There's no one here that absolutely thrills me. So I'm kind of looking back at the receiver position. I'd like to build up some depth. And I think I'm going to go with Jayden Daniels from the 49ers. We saw the blow up season last year. I'm a little cool on him and his role compared to Ricky Pearsall and Brandon Ayuk. But if Jennings goes back to that slot role, I think he's shown enough talent that short term he can give me some production, and maybe long term ends up being one of the locked in starters to replace Deebo Samuel there, and can give me some good off the bench production.
And for what it's worth, this is more than 2 rounds after Ricky Pearsall went, and well after where Brandon Ayuk went as well. So it's not like you're choosing him over either of those teammates.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the value is just much better here. I think I'd rather Jennings at the beginning of the 11th than taking Ayuk or Pearsall in the late 8th around where they went.
We'll close out these round 11 picks and then maybe talk some like ending strategy. We're not going to go all the way through this because you guys don't need to watch us make 20th round picks. I think it's interesting here, guys, that I go back into the sidebar. I still have no tight end. And now the draft war room's like, dude, why don't you take one of these upside rookies for the position because you got enough receivers. The running backs are fine, but you don't need another one there right now. But what you want to do is chase Elijah Arroyo or Mason Taylor for some fantasy upside. I can see it. I still think I'm going to go running back here and push off tight end because I don't think that tight end's going to be picked over by round 12 or beyond. And frankly, even if I end up missing out on Elijah Arroyo, all I'm really missing is the pronunciation opportunity. So I'm going to take the running back. I'm going to reach over those top 2 picks and take Tajay Spears because I like the chance that he has to improve as an asset this year. We've talked about him as a sleeper. You can find him among our sleepers on draftsharks.com. I think we're getting more work for Tajay Spears this year than we got last year. And then if Tony Pollard goes down or if Tony Pollard's gone after the season or anything along those lines, Tajay Spears could be a significantly appreciating asset in Dynasty.
Yeah, he was at the top of my queue. I would have taken Spears if he had made it to me. He was just banged up all last year. But go back to his rookie year, the efficiency was really good on the ground. He caught a lot of balls. Tony Pollard was just okay last year. I think the Titans talked all last offseason about that being kind of interchangeable situation, and I think a real committee. I think Spears' injuries last year just prevented that from being the case. I think Spears is someone who's definitely going to climb in value over the next few months here. So Spears was at the top of my queue. I was prepared to take Sam Darnold if he made it to me there, which would have been my 4th quarterback. But again, we talk about just accumulating value. I don't even like Sam Darnold, but like he's still only 28. He's locked in as a starter this year. Definitely a chance he starts another handful of seasons. So I just think he was just a nice value in the, or what would it be, in the 10th round here, like in a super flex. I just think he shouldn't have been hanging around at that point. So I was going to take him if he made it to me. He does not a ton at running back that interests me at this point. So I would continue pushing that off at least one more round. I'm going to take Michael Pittman here. Coming off a disappointing season and what was a bad season for the Colts in general, Michael Pittman dealt with injuries. He had the back injury he was playing through for much of the season. But this is a guy who was like a 22, 23, 24% target share guy, for his couple of seasons before last year. Again, he's still only 27 years old. We'll figure out the quarterback situation in Indianapolis, but I just think talent-wise, I think Pittman makes sense at this point.
I totally agree. I think Michael Pittman has become an underappreciated asset across fantasy formats at this point. And that was kind of an interesting round 11 for veteran wide receivers. So you kicked it off with Jayden Daniels, Shane. Then we saw Jack Besh go. Then Calvin Ridley later in that round, Deebo Samuel, Michael Pittman, like you mentioned, Jared. I like both Calvin Ridley and Michael Pittman at least over Jack Besh, probably Deebo Samuel as well. Although I'm a little bit, I don't know what to make of him. I guess I wouldn't be surprised if we get a limited Deebo this year. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a more motivated Deebo. So I probably should just put him in with Calvin Ridley and Michael Pittman. I went into prospect season loving the upside on Jack Besh, but the way that he has climbed in perceived value has me kind of leaning the other direction, where I wonder if the market is too high on the player now and the ceiling is limited. And I'd rather just go ahead and get somebody that I know is likely to be better for at least this season. And then we'll see about the players beyond that. I don't know. I guess, Shane, first to you, because you're a prospect guy. Am I swinging too far on Jack Besh, or do you think that he could be kind of a poster child here for falling too in love with the young player.
I actually think you're right. Feel like because of the situation and people, myself included, don't love Jacoby Myers aside. Some of the Raiders receivers past that, people are kind of pumping him up a little bit. And the receiver that we've heard a ton about in rookie camp and mini camp has been Dante Thornton, the other rookie wide receiver they drafted. So that gives me even more pause. I wouldn't want to invest this high a pick in Jack Bech when it looks like he's probably going to be the wide receiver 4, plus Brock Bowers is there. I don't know if we get that rookie return that we expect just because of the situation and player.
And by the way, Jacoby Myers just went at the top of round 12 in this draft before I paused the thing. So still a criminally underrated player. Jared, I know how you feel about Jack Bech. What do you think about kind of the broader potential for overrating young players versus just taking productive players?
I mean, we see that all the time. Like you're going to have multiple owners in your dynasty league that are just rookie happy and just want to get the new shiny toy who might be a thing, in 3 years. I wasn't a fan of Bech at any point in the pre-draft process, so it's been pretty easy for me to avoid him in both redraft and dynasty startups.
This is the point in the draft where I like having my quarterback set, where I like having a nice stable of wide receivers. And if we were playing this thing out the rest of the way, I feel like my team's set to just kind of catch value that comes to me. I don't get here feeling like I have needs. I don't have a tight end yet, but like I said before, I can wait and see what happens. And even if I leave this draft, like, I don't like my tight ends, I don't really care. I can figure it out for this season. I can get a rookie next year. I can make a trade probably with one of these teams that have multiple tight ends once they get to the season and realize that they're only going to start one of those guys and the second one doesn't matter at all. So I'm happy with the way this one's going. Jared, is there anything that you would do differently with your team or anything about what you would do going forward?
Yeah, I'm fairly happy. I definitely like how the quarterback room shook out, considering how long I waited for those second and third guys. I was happy to get, two young guys with at least decent upside. Like getting Jonathan Taylor where I did. I think the wide receiver core is good enough. To me, again, it's going to come down to Colson Loveland. And, again, I'm not even sure I'd make that pick again if I could do it. I need Loveland to be like a perennial top 5 tight end, a difference-making tight end for that pick to pay off. Maybe a receiver there would have been the better decision. But again, that's why doing mock drafts is so useful. You just see how this type of stuff plays out. But that's definitely the pick I would consider redoing if I did it over again. And then a running back, like I'm not worried about only having one at this point. I'll cobble together a room. I'll ideally get a combination of, more current producers and younger guys. Ideally get some guys that, offer a mix of both, but I would definitely spend like another 5 or 6 picks in this startup draft on running backs to build out that room, give it some depth, give me some options.
Shane, anything that you would do differently looking back on the way this draft has played out to this point?
I think the linchpin of the draft for me was taking Christian McCaffrey the 3-1, probably 15 spots too high, but I think created some good theory discussion here. And, when you're picking at the turn, that's what you got to do. If you like the player, he's not coming back to you. So I actually like how the build came out for me. I like my receivers with Xavier Worthy, DJ Moore, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Juwan Jennings, and then the quarterback I think worked out waiting Justin Fields as a QB2 with Jayden Daniels gives me all that rushing upside, and Tua gives me a kind of a nice balance there. So I'm pretty happy with how this came out in a different way to take McCaffrey there as an RB2 that early.
I agree. And kind of what you guys both alluded to is if it is a mock draft and you're like, I don't know if I should do this or if I should do that, go ahead and take the riskier path and see what happens. That if you're doing mock drafts, once you have synced your team on draftsharks.com, and you can do as many mocks as you want right there on the website without leaving, go ahead and take the riskier path, because what's probably going to happen if you take, the safe quarterback or, fill out that second running back spot because you feel like you need to. You know what's going to happen. You're going to wind up with a roster that you're fine with. What you don't know is if you take that riskier step, how that's going to work out later in your draft. And you can even do it multiple times because it's not going to play out the same way every time. But that's really the whole point of having these mock drafts. We want to see what's going to happen. We're talking through our strategies here, so it's a little bit different for our purposes than it is for yours. But in general, the whole reason that you do a mock draft, and that you should do mock drafts before, especially the more serious drafts that you do, is to play it out so that when you get to the real thing, you know how to react. Like when a surprise pick, when a team 9 doesn't take a quarterback through the first half of your draft, you'll know how you're going to react to that, whether it makes you push off quarterback longer or when you want to take one or who you want to pair with the older guy that you got as your second QB. So All that practice is good for you. Make sure you sync your team on draftsharks.com so you get those draft war room rankings specific to your league like we got here. It's got all those settings in there. It knows what you need to do. It knows what the values are, and it knows who's gone in your draft. So it knows who's likely to get back and who's not available to you anymore. It's going to help guide you through, just like it did for me through this whole draft. Whether you're doing a dynasty startup, whether you've already done a startup and you're doing rookie drafts, or if you're just kind of watching this to see general thoughts on players and you're only a redraft player at this point, Draft Sharks is around to help you with all of those formats. We want to be your unfair advantage.